life of the Earl of Oxford, Edward de Vere. It's actually all they have, since there's absolutely no documentary evidence that Edward de Vere was in any way connected with the work. Thus, it's important to them that the vulgar scandal, the dark lady, the rival poet, and the lovely boy of the sonnets have to be people who featured in de Vere's life. The willing vessel for my lord's bodily excrescences was, it seems, Penelope Rich, sister of the Earl of Essex. Mr. Waugh assures us that it was the subject of considerable contemporary gossip. I believe it's true, actually. The gossip, not the Rumpy-Pumpy. There are seemingly endless videos by Mr. Waugh on this topic in which he finds puns based, for example, on the name Rich, and many references to the loose morals of Lady Penelope. Oh, sorry, wrong picture. Lady Penelope Rich. It's worth mentioning, though, that there are special reasons why Penelope was the subject of scurrilous rumours at the time. It was a world of factions. Given her family connections, she was, of course, of the Essex faction, and the events of her life provided rich pickings for those in search of saucy details that might discredit that talented and courageous woman. Penelope was contracted in marriage to the odious Robert Rich, grandson of Richard Rich, who betrayed the generous friendship of Sir Thomas More by giving false evidence that sent him to the block. It was not a happy marriage, and ultimately she found solace in the man who eventually became her second husband, Charles Blount, but not before she had been sonneted rigid by Sir Philip Sidney, who is said to have mentioned her with affection as he died a painful hero's death in Arnhem. It's all detailed in the excellent Lady Penelope by Sally Varlow. In this video, Mr. Waugh looks for evidence of that aristocratic Rumpy-Pumpy in this picture. The title of the print is The Portraiture of the Right Honourable Lords, the two most noble Henrys, revived the Earls of Oxford and Southampton. So, allow me to take you through the main arguments made by Waugh. I don't pretend to be impartial, so feel free to check for yourself. He starts off by asserting that the gossips and literary hacks were busily hinting that there was some secret about the sex life of the Earl of Oxford, including a mention of Oxford's wife, Lady Elizabeth Trentham, as a virgin, an odd assertion considering she had been married for years. In his description of the picture, he draws attention to the de Vere motto and crest in the top left corner, and to the fact that the two Henrys have their fingers entwined, suggesting some kind of bond between the two men. He then looks at the inscription under the horse's belly, which he reads as de Vere, and the siege depicted underneath the inscription, which, he says, is a puzzler because there was never any military action in the town of Vere. This is where we see the original picture on which this engraving is based. Actually, saying that this engraving is based on the earlier picture is a massive understatement. The two Henrys is not so much an engraving as a Jacobean deep fake. The engraver has simply changed the heads of the two subjects in the picture and altered the writing and the heraldry. Even the panorama visible under the horse's belly has been left intact, with the besieged town simply acquiring a new name. On the original, the besieged town was labelled Pressburg and the river labelled Danube. He concludes that there must be something significant about using the name of the town, from which some thought the de Veres took their name. So the engraver must therefore be interested in the name rather than the place, since the town itself was never besieged. He then introduces the question of why the engraver has used the original engraving rather than starting afresh. I don't like the idea of laziness or a mistake. They thought things out very carefully then. They were incredibly cunning. There has to be a reason. No question of sticking the heads on and saying that'll do. So why has this engraving been chosen? He doesn't present any evidence to the effect that they, printers, engravers, or maybe everyone with a heartbeat, were also preternaturally clever in Jacobean England. He now comments on the engraving in its earlier state. It depicts Frederick V, King of Bohemia, and Gabriel Bethlen, the prince who had laid siege to Pressburg before making a treaty of eternal peace inviolable with Frederick. The treaty sadly collapsed soon after. So why did the engraver choose this picture? Because, Mr. Waugh implies, the engraver wants to announce to the world that Henry Wriothesley was actually the natural son of Edward de Vere, and in the picture we see the effect of this. Just as Gabriel Bethlen ceded Pressburg